The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Great crowds were traveling with Jesus, and he turned and addressed them. If anyone comes to me without hating his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Which of you wishing to construct a tower does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if there is enough for its completion? Otherwise, after laying the foundation and finding himself unable to finish the work, the onlookers should laugh at him and say, "This one began to build, but did not have the resources to finish." Well, what king marching into battle would not first sit down and decide whether, with 10,000 troops, he can successfully oppose another king advancing upon him with 20,000 troops? But if not, while he is still far away, he will send a delegation to ask for peace terms in the same way. Anyone who does not renounce all his possessions cannot be my disciple. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Great crowds were traveling with Jesus, and he turned and addressed them. If anyone comes to me without hating his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. But doesn't God in the gospel ask us to love our enemies? Is this a contradiction in what Christ is saying here? Not at all. If you read it simply on one level, you'll never get the point that he's trying to make. Here, one really has to understand the way that Christ is using this word. We have to understand it in its purest form in order to make sense of it. God is not asking us to hate people, anyone, it doesn't matter. To love all and to be good to all. But today, we do have in this gospel the phraseology of hatred. But the human being in his broken nature only knows the emotional expression of hatred on one level. He hates. His broken nature allows him to hate, whether he hates snakes, spiders, particular kind of food, whether he hates this culture, the way this person speaks, the language, and so on, the family members and so on. They hate. The human being hates. It's the only hatred that we're familiar with. We hate. But it's not the way Christ is using the word hate at all today. He's using it in its purest form, the way he gave these emotions to Adam and Eve. Because hatred and anger is a human emotion that God gave to mankind. Anger is part of the 6 concupiscible appetites of feelings. Hatred is one of the irascible appetites or feelings that moves the human being to do something or to respond to something. But it was given with a specific intention by God to the human being. But in our brokenness, we only know of one way of using it. We use it as a weapon. If we're frustrated about something, we get angry. It's a natural process. We get angry. Anger controls another person, tries to convince another person to see things in a particular way. And out of that anger comes hatred. It's a process. Frustration, anger, hatred, revenge, and fury. It's a process. But anger and hatred are human emotions that are meant as a good. They're meant to be a good for us. But the way we use it is often wrong. The ignorant, the faint-hearted, the suspicious, fearing injury from almost every direction will fall prey to this passion. And one of our saints reminds us, in these kind of people, we just have to have pity. We've all known human beings, I have no doubts, I know I have, people who are just angry. They're filled with hatred. You can't talk to them about anything reasonable because they're full of toxic poisons. Anger as a human emotion dominates, and so does hatred. Out of the 11 human emotions, these now have become a dominant emotion in them. The dominant feeling. And out of this kind of human hatred, not what God intended, comes an estranging of souls. Because in the end, all nature is united in a bond of love. Love gathers. Love always tends towards union, to be united. But hatred always tends towards disunion. For a person who hates, there's personal unhappiness. The man who hates inflicts graver injuries upon himself than upon anyone else. And St. Jerome reminds us, what reward is there in hatred? Except the terrifying darkness of soul and the horror of a confused mind. If you want to know why the human being is so irrational today and so unreasonable, because many people today have a deep-seated anger and hatred. And I told you this story not too long ago. I was in a store, and this couple came in, and it looked like they were confused, and I went to say something to them, and they jumped at me with both feet. I couldn't believe it. I said, I felt like saying, what kind of day have you had today? What about the goodness of this particular moment? It was gone in an instant. But that's the way the human being lives his life today. He hates and he's angry, and we justify our hatreds. That's the problem. We justify them before God. Oh, they hurt me. I'm deeply emotionally destroyed, or whatever. But in the end, it brings an embittered soul. And these souls have this bitter countenance. And I had a man in one of my parishes who classifies as one of these souls. He was always, no matter what I said, he always came out with a red face and both fists and both feet. Always. He'd invite me over to his house for dinner, and all the toxins would just come out. And all I could do was feel sorry for him and have pity for him. How unhappy is a human being that hates? They become their own worst enemy. And then on top of that, a person who hates brings the anger of God upon themselves. And one of our saints reminds us, although you fast much and constantly go to church and pray continuously, if you hate your brother, you're not numbered among the children of God. Wow. Wow, we thought we could hate somebody and still be a child of God and go to heaven. But we can't hate. We're not supposed to. If our hatred is directed towards a fellow man, we must bear in mind that as long as we have this hatred voluntarily, nourished within us, we should not approach the sacraments. We can't even recite the Lord's Prayer without lying. For plainly, he orders us to say, forgive us our trespasses, and we forgive those who trespass against us. How many times over the years have I talked to people who just say to me, I can't forgive, but it happened 80 years ago. What do you mean you can't forgive? But they're so badly damaged and ingrained in that anger and hatred, they can't let go of it. It's become like a baby blanket that keeps them warm at night. And going to communion is not a problem. Scripture reminds us, everyone who hates his brother is a murderer. And if anyone says, I love God and hates his brother, he is a liar. St. Paul. Now, having said that, that's the way we use hatred in our broken nature. What Christ is talking about today is a little bit different. Using hatred in a purified sense, in a purified form, allows the human being to move away from something that is dangerous to his eternal salvation. I'll give you a modern-day example. A young woman goes out for a date on a first time with a young man she met maybe in school or work or whatever. They've been friends for a while and he seems like a pretty nice guy. One night they're out on a date. And all of a sudden, the young man begins to approach her in a way that she had not planned. He begins to touch her in a particular way that she did not give him permission to do. But he figures he has a right anyways. In the end, she has to push him off. And she gets angry. But you see, that is using anger in a correct way. To move us away from something that is sinful. We use anger to destroy other human beings, and we use hatred the same way to destroy another person. At least that's what we think. But these emotions were given to us by God to keep us from falling into sin. Move away from something that causes you to sin. Have the courage. And this is the way that Christ is using this particular terminology today. If you can't move away from those who are standing in your way of following me, then you must move away from them. How many times throughout the years have I had young men and even young women who wanted to become nuns, or young men who wanted to become priests? But oh my gosh, the first time the parents find out, oh no, that's not for you. They don't make any money. You can't be a priest. Look what all the priests and bishops are guilty of nowadays. And so on and so on. So who throughout the years has become the greatest obstacle? Family members. Mother and father. My own mother said to me when I was told that I was discerning a vocation to the priesthood, hopefully enter the seminary soon, said to me, why? Do you have a good job? Why would you want to do that? Go out and hug a tree. I said, what? Go hug a tree? I said, I don't want to hug a tree. I want to hug God. God made the trees. What do I want to hug them for? But you see, that's what happens. Parents stand in the way of their children, male or female, doesn't matter, their vocation to which God calls them. And a lot of times, children will express that at a very young age. As they grow up, the parents convince the child more and more, no. Do you need to be a doctor? Do you need to be famous? Do you need to be an Indian chief or whatever? Oh, no, don't be, no, you can't do this because you're not going to make any money, you're always going to be poor, and so on and so on. But that's the reasoning. And Christ is saying, move away from them. If you read the lives of the saints, you'll discover many of them, hundreds of them, had to sneak out of their house at night, sometimes barefooted, with their clothes on the back. And I think right off the case of St. Charbel Maklouf from Lebanon, whose mother and father were resolutely against him becoming a priest or becoming a monk. So when he was young, he put a cloak on, left the house quietly with no shoes, and walked 200 miles barefooted to the nearest monastery. They made him wait outside for 3 days to test his vocation through snow and rain and cold weather. But he persevered, and they allowed him into the monastery. Many years later, his parents came to see him. Many years. By this time, he was a professed monk. And he told the abbot, he said, "Tell my mother and father I do not wish to see them. I will pray for them and hope to see them in eternal life." You see, he knew that they were an obstacle to his vocation. So he moved away from them. He didn't hate them. He didn't hate them. Not in the way we use hatred. But he moved away to follow his vocation, became a canonized saint. And this is what the Gospel of Luke reminds us of today. If we can't move away from people that stand in our way of God, then we really got to think of the value of what God means to us. And we're not here to talk about separation of husband, wives, and children, and so on and so on. But many times in confession throughout the years, people have said to me, "Oh, Father, I missed Mass last Sunday." I said, "Why?" "Well, you know, my family came into town. They don't go to church, and I was embarrassed." I said, "Excuse me?" I was embarrassed to go to church, and I said, "What about giving a good example? And inviting them to come to church with you, and if they don't want to go, you go anyways. Move away from those who keep you from God. Instead, what do? We cave in. We become ashamed and embarrassed of God. That's the sad part. We love all people. We're supposed to. Love your enemies. Love your mother and father. Love your wife and your children, brothers and sisters, and so on and so on. But distance yourself from anyone who keeps you from God. And having said that, I want to talk a little bit about something that is plaguing the modern church, and it hasn't just started recently. It's a cancer. It's a disease that is present in the church around the world today. And it isn't the perverts in the church. It's about the weakness and the carelessness of the human being today concerning God. The human being today is not only lukewarm, but he's absolutely negligent when it comes to God and his spiritual life. Just watch how people run out the door after communion. These are the souls that are negligent and ignorant of God. They are like blind, dead people. They have no divine life in them. They don't even understand the mystery of what they're doing here. There isn't a person on the face of the earth today who's going to church somewhere who doesn't think for one moment that they're not going to heaven. We've all bought the idea we're all going to heaven. We're not willing to take a single step to make that happen. Somehow we've fallen into the idea that everything is automatic. All I got to do is put in a coin, pull a lever, and out comes salvation. No, I'm sorry, it doesn't work. Our Lord had told Sister Faustina back in the 1920s, Saint Sister Faustina, He said, many people come forward to receive me in communion, and most treat me like a dead object. When's the last time you received communion, God was alive for you? Because you have a spiritual life. You know now that you have a divine life coming inside of you, coming to reveal itself to you, to live in you. Don't we much rather run out the door? Couldn't care less. Because our minds are always crowded out with 1,000 different things. When's the last time we spent a holy hour in prayer? Went to a daily mass? Said some prayers to God during the week? The human being today is spiritually dead. He doesn't know what it means to be alive in God. He doesn't know how to experience God in his prayer life. Some spiritual writers call these souls retarded. I like to call them midgets. They're short-sighted. God has so much he wants to give to us, so much. We couldn't care less. The world is pulling at us from every angle. We're occupied by everything. And it certainly isn't everybody, I'm sure of that. But percentage-wise, it's most. We misuse seriously the divine graces God wishes to give to us in the most important experience of our life and the holy sacrifice of the Mass. How many of us came to church today understanding that today we're doing the most important thing we will ever do for our eternal salvation right here? We came to church, oh, hurry up, come on, come on, we're running late, hurry up, come on, or we're listening to the music or whatever. Oh, hurry up, Father, the homily's too long, I got to get out of here, I got to be at lunch, I got to do this and so on. Because the world is always weighing us down. We have no divine life. There is no divine energy within us. And the church around the world is suffering because of it. And it isn't just the people in the pew. It's the bishops and the priests who have no fire, who have no love for God, who like to tell jokes, who don't know how to give a proper homily, who don't know how to speak on the truth, even when it hurts and it's painful, because they don't want to offend anybody. So the soul becomes indifferent to God. And we only need to look at ourselves, not at anybody else. We can't judge anybody else's soul. We need to look at ourselves and see what kind of a spiritual life do we have? Are we one of those retarded souls? Are we like abnormal children who never pass from adolescence to adulthood in a spiritual life? I'm talking about the soul here. They never develop any sort of maturity. And remember this, the faults and the failings that we love to excuse that we've had since we were little kids only grow within us and become stronger. They don't go away. They don't stay on a neutral plane. They only grow. If I get angry at little things, it only becomes worse. If I hate a little way, it only becomes worse. I will hate more. I become more angry. If I'm lustful, I just become more lustful. If I'm a thief, I just steal more. And it just grows. The problem is we are so blind today we don't recognize it. We don't stop the process. We don't reverse it. If we don't develop a spiritual life and an intimacy with God, and remember, and I always tell people, it isn't about reading a book. The book gives us an image of Christ, absolutely. But it's about that interior mystery of receiving God within and allowing His divine life to flavor us, to transform us, so we can leave behind this tepidity, this dryness, this darkness, this ignorance. I still have people today in confession asking me, "Oh, Father, I didn't know that was a sin." I said, "How long have you been a Catholic?" "All of my life." He said, "How could you not know that that's a sin?" Because we don't care. We just don't care. When it comes to God, we're more interested in everything else but God. And if you paid attention to our first reading, I think it spells it out pretty clearly. For the corruptible body burdens the soul, and the earth's shelter weighs down the mind. It has so many concerns. Scarcely can we guess the things on earth. And what is within our grasp we find with difficulty. But what about the things in heaven? Who can search them out? Yes, it is a hard road. Yes, it is difficult. But God asks a sacrifice from us. We want to go to heaven one day. We all think we're going to go there. But we've got to take the necessary steps to get there. Nothing is automatic. God is not going to simply say, "Well, what the heck, you thought you were going to go to heaven, so therefore I'm just going to let you in and not going to worry." It doesn't work that way. We have to work at our salvation every day. We have to have a prayer life every day, not just here in the house of God, but every day, everywhere we go, to think of God. It's not just the bishop and the priests and nuns and so on, and monks that do that. Everybody is called to do that. And we need to stop neglecting the little things. This is where the problem lies. We excuse the little things, which in the end become grave. Our daily merit is orderly constituted by these little acts of virtue from morning to night. But how many people even practice virtue today? It used to be in a funeral mass. When you buried somebody, you extol their virtues and how they lived their love for God and how you could see it in them. You can't do that today because people don't know what virtue and holiness even is. We've fallen right into the ideas of the world and everybody else. We're in the world, but we're not supposed to be of it, but we are. So all those little things that just continue to happen every day are just excused. I continue to be an impatient human being, and I get angry and hate and frustrated and so on and so on. And like a drop of water on a rock, it just wears and wears and wears on me. Holiness is a habit. It grows as we practice it, but the same is true with vice. Modern man today leans towards vice. Holiness doesn't mean much anymore. Carelessness is part of our experience. We come to Mass, all we want to do is get out of here. All personal piety and holiness disappears. And everything simply becomes an exterior expression. Lukewarmness and carelessness becomes a part of who we are. And in the end, we lose our souls. Neglect in little things leads us to forgetfulness and renders everything we do unfruitful. And probably somewhere along the way we told ourselves we're doing everything for the love of God, when in reality we're doing it for ourselves. This is part of the modern day disease. If people treated Christ like a dead object 100 years ago, today they treat him even worse. Not only is God dead for many, but many people could even care less whether God even exists.